Joining me in this episode are Steve Sorensen and Jordan Lindstrom of Johnsonville. Steve is the Senior Director of Learning and Culture, and Jordan is the Senior Organizational Development Leader. We're talking AI transformation with values and culture in this one. Enjoy the conversation. You're listening to Working Forward, a future of work focused podcast from People Forward Network. These episodes pave the road ahead, helping us confidently step into the future as a leader who moves people forward. After all, the best way to predict the future is to create it. Let's go. I am really excited for this episode of Working Forward because I've got two gentlemen and scholars from Johnsonville. I guarantee you've heard that company, especially in the summertime with all your cookouts, Steve Sorensen and Jordan Lindstrom. And I'm really excited because we get to learn about and hear behind the scenes of really well-known companies like that are pretty big. How is it that they're doing culture so well? How are they approaching changes related to artificial intelligence? We're going to learn today from them behind the scenes on a lot of those things related to the company. So it's going to be a blast today. So first off, welcome, Steve and Jordan. It's good to have you both here.
Great to be here.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Awesome, guys. Well, let's start off here first. Before we get into the meat of the stuff, no pun intended, let's start with Jordan. Tell us a little about you, your role, some of the things you do at Johnsonville, and then Steve will come over to you and do that too to get things kicked off. So Jordan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that. Yeah, so Jordan Lindstrom, I oversee our organizational development function, really the strategy for how do we take organizational development and what do we do and what do we focus on? There's kind of four, I guess, key buckets that I oversee. Culture strategy is the big one, and that's why we're here today, and we're excited to talk about it. But executive coaching is also really critical. How are we developing our leaders, especially critical senior leaders that take on those roles that really influence the organization culturally, but also from a performance and results perspective? I oversee assessment selection. How do we use assessments internally? How do we use assessments when we're bringing members in to align on their skill sets and where we think they'll be really strong? So those are three of the big ones. And then the fourth one that's really exciting that we'll probably get into today is our talent strategies. So how do we take culture and integrate that into how we do annual performance reviews, right? How do we do day-to-day coaching, succession planning, really everything in that talent structure. So that's what I oversee. I've been at Johnsonville coming up on 2 years, and that's been my area of focus.
That's awesome, Jordan. How about you, Steve?
So I'm Steve Sorensen. I'm the Senior Director of our Learning and Culture function. So I have four main areas that I oversee as well. So Jordan has one of them. Jordan reports into me. He takes care of all the great things that he's talked about, does an amazing job with it. I also have a person on my team that helps with our learning strategy. So how do we develop members all the way from orientation to senior level leaders and all the way in between there, from a skill set, a performance base, as well as a behavioral side? How do we develop people so that we are really truly developing folks that expect nothing less than personal greatness from themselves and others? That's what we focus on at Johnsonville across the board. I also have a director of member services. So she's really focused on member experience, member relations. How do we get going? One of the things Jordan didn't talk about in his area is we do an annual survey. We just went through that process, and we're going to talk a little bit about AI, of how we've been using AI to help us synthesize some of that down to get to be more of a digestible piece of information. So she's over like our member relations, member experience. And then I have a gentleman that leads our operational execution. So the things that Jordan and Kelly and April and my team lead, Corey is involved in helping us get that through our deskless members inside of our manufacturing facilities. So that's my whole role. Basically, anything with OD&L, anything with culture, anything with member relations is kind of what I oversee and coach for the organization. And I've been here about 12 years at Johnsonville.
I love it so much. And those that are listening, it's like you can just hear the wisdom that these guys are about to impart on us today when it comes to this blend, this intersection of so much change, artificial intelligence, values, culture. What does it look like to operationalize, strategize, and then execute with people and move that way? We're going to get right into it. And so to start off with, really interesting time at Johnsonville. Steve, you had shared this with me a few weeks ago, and I'm really excited to kick off with this, and we'll start with you. And that is around values. Johnsonville as a company, your values and your culture are so important to you as a company, which I think is really cool. But the other cool thing about it is, I'm sure you guys have experienced this outside of Johnsonville, is you can hear companies say values are important, but then those values, they're just kind of there on the wall, or maybe they're not touched or reconsidered, refined over the years if they were developed 40 years ago. That's not Johnsonville. You've just gone through a really interesting process, haven't you, of reimagining, getting everyone involved around your values. Walk us through what that's been like and what you ended up with, Steve.
Yeah, so let me start off, and then I'm going to hand it over to Jordan because he was really instrumental in helping us down that journey. But I have the poster on the wall behind me, just as that is the snapshot of our culture. What's interesting is you think about our culture; it's multifaceted, right? It is our mission of the organization, which that is to create an environment that requires each of us to fully develop our God-given talents and help others do the same. And we achieve that by living the Johnsonville way. And the Johnsonville way statement is kind of our cultural ethos statement, if you will. The interesting thing, Jason, about our cultural ethos statement, the Johnsonville way, there's not one word that's changed on that since the early 90s. So that cultural component of who we are has not changed. What we have changed is we used to have 9 core values. And Jordan did a lot of great research of big things. And he's going to talk about what some best practices we found about what culture should look like and how many values and how you determine the values. But we just went through that process of going from 9 core values that we've had for a long, long time. And we found members couldn't remember them. And if you can't remember it, how do you live it? And how do you lead it, right? How do you hold people accountable when the belief is really wide of what our culture is? We need to get to a very narrow pathway. So Jordan, you want to walk through the journey you took us on?
Yeah, I think stepping back right to the beginning, why did we go towards this journey? And Steve started to hit on it a little bit, but we were getting feedback from members. We pride ourselves. We view feedback as a gift. That's a part of our culture. So no one is above getting feedback. And we started to gather a lot of feedback from our members, and we were hearing things like, hey, the culture might not be operating the way we think it should consistently across different settings, maybe locations, shifts. And as we started to get this feedback through conversations and surveys, we decided to dive into, well, why might that be the case? And Steve kind of hit on it. Were members actually able to retain and remember what it is that we define our culture by? And so Steve did this with a lot of members. I got to do it with some members. We'd get them in a room. We'd put them in groups of 4. And we'd say, all right, you got 20 minutes as a team. Can you write out the values? Can you write out our guiding principles? Can you write out the mission? Can you write out our leadership principles? And we started to challenge and test to see how well could they actually recall the information. 0 teams were able to successfully write all that information out. It ends up being over 20 plus different items, unique elements that were intentionally designed to create some definition around what our incredible culture is with great intent. However, as Steve said, if you can't remember it, are you actually able to live it? And that was what we noticed, is as we went to these teams, even 50% of the information that defined our culture, we weren't able to recall it as an organization. And so what ended up happening is over the course of time, we started to overemphasize certain aspects. One team might say, I really like these 2 values and I really like this guiding principle. And their culture kind of became 3 things as a part of this large role. And then you went to another team and they're like, but we like these values and we like this guiding principle. And over time, we had hundreds, if not thousands, of interpretations of what the culture really was. So it started us down this journey to say, we got to get to a point where there's a common definition of what this culture is. And that was going to be rooted in the Johnsonville Way statement, which we'll talk about today. That's really our ethos statement that describes who we are and how we get work done as an organization. And our values should support us living this Johnsonville Way statement. And so the journey was interesting. We took all of the historical collateral we had. Think about everything our pretty brilliant owner who created our culture, Ralph Stayer, everything he's ever talked about the culture, the books he's written, the collateral he's produced. We looked, of course, at our previous values, right? We looked at our mission statement, all these things to start synthesizing what are themes across all of these. What are some of the elements that keep popping up consistently, regardless if we're looking at the values or the statement or something Ralph has said? And then we took it a step further and we said, we got to talk to our members. And so we worked with leaders to identify who are the members on your teams that are known for living the culture at the highest level. And so I ended up doing over 30 interviews with these cultural ambassadors, asking them questions about, hey, you were asked to come and talk to me because you're considered a cultural ambassador. What are you doing every day? What are you showing up with every day that someone says that person is living the culture? And we started to pull out themes from those conversations. And then we took it one step further. I know we're going to talk about AI today. If you're not using it, you're falling behind. So we ended up pulling in AI to say, what does AI, with every interview Ralph's ever done, all the collateral, all the data that's out there, Glassdoor reviews talking about, right, our culture and what makes us special, can we synthesize that and find out what are the themes that make our culture unique? And as we did all this separate research, these 4 themes just kept popping up consistently, regardless of who we talked to or what we looked into. And that was the development process of our 4 new values. So we were able to walk through that entire change journey with all of our members to introduce them to how these 4 values came to be and how they're really are rooted in who we are and who we've been and how they're going to help us get to where we want to be in the future. So Steve, I don't know if you have anything to add about that journey.
The only thing I want to add, I think you covered it really well, Jordan, was when we got down to those 4 values, Jordan had done research around what are best practices around core values for an organization. And best practices, you should have 4 or 5. That's what people can generally remember. We had 9, too many. The other thing is they should be unique and distinctive to your organization. When we looked at the 9 core values and we looked across Fortune 500 companies, most companies had 1, 2, up to 5 of the same values. And it's like, how unique and distinctive is it really? So when we got down to these, and those 4 values ended up with a humble candor, right? Members have the ability to step into conversations with care and have some candor around it. The second was collaborative teamwork. Our members work together cross-functionally, but I also get my work done, right? I can be trusted to get my stuff done, counted on to deliver results. The other one is about learning agility. We don't always know how we're going to get there. You know, we have a phrase that we use, if you're not setting goals that make you want to puke in the sink a little bit, you're probably not setting your goals out far enough. And then the last one is personal commitment. I have to be committed to these values because if I don't model the behaviors, how can I expect Jordan to do it? How can I expect Jason to do it? How can I expect any member to do it? So that's the only thing I'd add is we were looking at some of those best practices across the board.
I love that. And real quick for the audience, what are those 4 values? Tell us what your 4 values are.
So I just covered them, right? It's humble candor, it's collaborative teamwork, it's learning agility, and it's personal commitment.
Thank you. And those are ones that you can easily remember. I love that you phrase it that way because, and the uniqueness, important aspect too. I don't know if you ever have gone to networking events before. Back when I was doing it, when I tend to do more stuff on the sales side of things, of work, I got some feedback pretty early on about how much of a dud, whenever it was my turn to give my 1 minute or 30-second elevator pitch, as to how poorly mine were done. I would get into details and talk about things that I thought were really interesting to people. And then it's not until you actually are coached and developed by experts in those things to be like, this is what's going to make it sticky. This is how it's going to resonate with people. You're going to get stuck in their brain. And a lot of it was stuff that was the opposite of what I thought, because I would get so hung up on, I want to tell them these stats, or I want to tell them like these results and stuff like that. And it's like, that's not what moves people's hearts. You know, the information, the stuff that really sticks, it's the emotive piece first, and then works its way into the schema and more the crystallized intelligence aspect kind of things. And so I love that you're talking about in the work that you did. It's really important for companies. If you feel like you're being a little bit too stuffy in this process, like loosen up the ties, you know, maybe don't wear the suit coat, get free, get creative, use those aspects of your brain to make them really gritty, to make them unique, to make them raw, to make them authentically you. And that might sound like something silly, but to your point, Steve, the reason that's important is this stuff has to stick in order for it to become habitual, in order for it to be something that people, regardless of whatever specific type of task they might be doing, that when they recall and they think of, how do we do things here? What should I do in this situation? You want there to be things that are stuck in there that are part of that identity that's really quick for them to be like, okay, I know how we're going to approach this and what we're going to do. And those things only happen when there's clarity. And the clarity has to happen when the things are unique, they're sticky, and there's only a few of them to remember. So the process of moving from 9 to 4, I'm not surprised at all that made such a difference in being able to help get some of the best practices in place around that. Now, when you go about, let's talk about communicating that out, because I do hear from leaders that like, they enjoy the process of like, hey, we went out, we got everybody involved, but then it's like, okay, the now what of like, how do we execute on these? Now that we've got these awesome new values, these best practices, how do we go about getting this integrated into what we do so that it's embedded within the work that we do? Jordan, can you take us a little bit behind the scenes of how you move from that we've developed them phase into how do we make them a verb now in terms of how we act?
Yeah, it's a process. It's a change process, right? And thankfully, we have a great portion of our organization that helps us deal with change. And we were able to partner alongside that team to say, hey, how do we build up awareness, desire, right? Going through this change process so that members could start to eventually live what these values are. And you brought up something, how do you make it sticky? And how do you make these things just come top of mind, not in a training session, but when you're out doing your job, how do you make it sticky? And the initial part of some increasing awareness and desire for our organization was every single member will be going through, and many have already, a culture workshop. It's not a culture training. It's a culture workshop. And it's a workshop because they get to partake in activities that create the stickiness that you described. They'll do an activity that you will perform better as a team if you live the value. So it was very strategic. One example that we will kind of shout out is an activity around a puzzle and how teams are on different, there's 4 teams essentially, and they're working on different puzzles, and they have to come up with, how do we get this full puzzle done as efficiently as possible? I don't want to give away all the secrets because if a member listens to this, we don't want to ruin the training. But essentially, if you're demonstrating behaviors associated with collaborative teamwork here at Johnsonville, you're going to get that puzzle done quicker. If you don't demonstrate those behaviors, it's going to take you a lot longer to complete the puzzle. So then you start to create that sticky learning where they see that, they experience it, and then they get back out into their role and they can say, hey, what did I do during that puzzle activity? What were the behaviors I demonstrated when I did that very memorable component of that workshop? And how do I apply that now here? It's what I'm doing in my day-to-day. So we made a commitment as an organization globally to take this culture workshop. Over 4,000 members are going to have a chance to all go through these same activities, creating that shared experience. We talk a lot at Johnsonville. If we want to have a shared culture, we have to have shared experiences. And this is just one of the ways and kind of the initial phase of starting to roll it out. I know, Steve, what's probably top of mind for you is the importance of alignment with senior leadership. Maybe you can speak to the efforts of what did we do to make sure that the message was cascaded properly.
Yeah, I think that's an important part. So the first workshop that we did was actually with our strategy team, which is our kind of our C-suite. We call that our strategy team, and our owner, Ralph Stayer. Because we knew that if this workshop doesn't land with them, if it doesn't resonate, we've got time to reconstruct it, rebuild it, things like that. Ralph sat in, and originally I was walking down the hallway, and our CEO, Don Fussner, who I think is an amazing leader for our organization, said, hey, Ralph's going to be sitting in on the conversation and he's just going to observe. Well, I know Ralph enough that Ralph's not going to observe. He's going to participate. He's going to get active. And after the session, Ralph said, the best compliment I think we could have gotten. every single member of the organization needs to go through this workshop. And it's a 3-hour workshop. So you think about the investment in time and resources to do that. But then the reason we started with a strategy team was so that they could start to cascade and start communicate, start using those behaviors with their teams. Then we went through all the coaches, which we don't have bosses. We don't have supervisors, Johnsonville. We have coaches. So we went through every coach all the way down to frontline levels, our team leaders. And now we're starting to go through our general membership, our non-coaching members. And we did that intentionally so we could cascade the message down. And we've talked a lot about, Jason, you mentioned about stickiness. Jordan likes to use this term red threads through the content. And there's a couple of red threads that we say 3-4 times in every single workshop. And one of them is we at Johnsonville aspire to be a great organization for a certain type of individual. It's the individuals that expect nothing less than personal greatness from themselves and others. We want to attract those members, we want to hire those members, and we want to fully develop those members. We talk a lot about, you could be a great member or a great person at another organization. You come to Johnsonville and it's just not a right fit. And you leave and have a great career. Doesn't make you a bad person. Just means you weren't a great fit in the organization. So that red thread goes throughout there. Jordan has this one that he came up with that we use all the time around the worst behaviors we tolerate as an organization become our culture. We talk about that a lot, and that sticks in a lot of people's heads. So it's amazing how we've done that. And then each of the behaviors, we've actually developed some guides. So I know we talked about this before. We have this lanyard, goes in everything, and it folds out into a map. And in this map, it has everything we talk about culture. Well, here's our 4 values. And for each one of the values, it has ideal behaviors. What does it look like when it's too much? And what does it look like when it's too little? So every person across the organization has this, and it just fits right into their lanyard. So anytime they're having a meeting, they say, hey, I want to talk to you about our values real quick. They can pull this open. It's got our cultural ethos statement on there. It's got our mission in the organization. It's got everything we talk about in a culture right in their hands to make it super easy for members to have. So when you talk about stickiness, this is how we try to create some of that stickiness.
Not only stickiness, but you're taking excuses away, Steve and Lord Jordan. Come on. No more like, we don't know what the culture is. We don't know the values. What am I supposed to do in this situation? Just be like, hey, they're on your lanyard. Like literally there's a map with everything that you need. I love that. But, all that kidding aside, you've also referenced this ethos. And so that this process of how you've distilled, you've gone from 9 down to 4, you figured out the themes, you involved everybody, you got these workshops. I want to dig into the workshops a little bit more in a minute in terms of how those are structured, because I think that's going to be helpful for the audience. But you mentioned an ethos statement as well. Can you share that ethos statement with us? How is it different from your values? What is it? What is the purpose of that ethos statement along with your values when it comes to your culture?
Yeah. So the best thing is it's on here, and it's this statement, right? We call it the Johnsonville way. So I can read it really quickly if you want, Jason. So what's really cool about this is the old values didn't connect back to the Johnsonville way statement. The values now tie directly back to this. So the first paragraph of the Johnsonville way is, we at Johnsonville have a moral responsibility to be the best company in the world. How we do that is through humble candor. Stephen Hawking has this quote, mankind's greatest achievements have come through talking. Mankind's greatest failures happen when we stop talking. So humble candor is about that moral responsibility. The second paragraph ties to collaborative teamwork, and it states, we will accomplish this as each one of us becomes better at defining and then serving the best interests of all those that have a stake in our success. Well, we need to work collaboratively to make sure that we're getting that across the organization. The third paragraph is all about learning agility, and that is, we will succeed by setting near-term objectives and long-term goals that will require personal growth and superlative performance by each of us. And we will change any objective or goals that no longer require personal growth and superlative performance to ones that do. So it's all about change. It's about rapid adaptation. It's about experimenting. It's about making mistakes. Ralph has this great phrase that anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. You're going to start out, you're going to make mistakes. That's how you learn. Now, there's 2 areas we don't want to do poorly: human safety, food safety. Those are non-negotiables. We don't experiment. We don't try anything. Those are hard and fast. And then the fourth and last paragraph of the Johnsonville way statement is, all about personal commitment. As an individual, I understand the Johnsonville way is about my performance and my accountability to the team. My commitment to stretch, grow, and excel is an unending one. This is the Johnsonville way, and I'm committed to it. So this ethos statement was created by members back 1980s. It hasn't changed but 6 words in over 40 years. And what those 6 words were is it used to say, as an organization, we understand. And along the way, the organization learned it isn't about we and us. It's about I and my. I can't control what Jordan does. I can control what I do, but I can influence Jordan. So when you think about the cultural ethos statement, it's the Johnsonville way. And for the first time in our history, now our values tie directly back to the Johnsonville way statement. So if you want to live the Johnsonville way, it's easy. You just live the values. If you want to live the values, you are living the Johnsonville way. And that gets us to a very narrow path. And we have a booklet that we've developed. It's called The Path We Follow. It's all about our history. It's about the Johnsonville way. It's about our culture. There was a book that was written before. So our workshops is called The Path We Continue to Follow. We're not changing certain aspects of our organization. We aren't changing the ethos statement. We aren't changing the mission. And we also aren't changing Ralph's belief. Ralph strongly believes, and I'm 100% aligned with this, most companies use their people to build their business. At Johnsonville, we want to use our business to build our people. So the stronger we are as an organization, the more we can develop, the more we can offer opportunities to folks. And that all comes through this mission and through our culture.
I love that. And it doesn't surprise me that your ethos statement came from the 80s. The best things came from the 80s decades, didn't they? I mean, my kids are starting to watch 80s movies now. They're like, Harry and the Hendersons, this is a great movie. I'm like, of course it is. It's from the 80s kind of thing. But it just, I think the cool thing about it is you said there were only like 6 words that had changed since the 80s, even though you've distilled the values down from 9 to 4. It shows the consistency, but also the refinement of understanding the context, that the message is still clear, the heart of the message, the spirit of what you're trying to do. But I love that even back in the 80s, that learning agility was one of those things that you had. So it's almost like, you know, you're Nostradamus back in the 80s of understanding like, hey, the way that we may be learning and developing now, there's probably going to be changes and advancements that are going to take place over time. So it's important for us to be able to change and adapt well as a team as we grow. And so I just think it's cool too to hear in your statement that all the way back in the 80s that there were things around learning agility back then. And certainly now that's become really important. We're going to get to more of that in just a minute, because I want to start eventually here in a few minutes. We're going to start getting into some of the, how are you handling AI? What are you thinking about AI within your company? But before we get there, I just want to flesh out a few more details around this culture workshop of how you're going about approaching that, especially through the change, the learning agility with the changes in the values. Jordan, let's come back to you. Can you walk us through what are some of the themes, the key components of those workshops? How do you try to group people together? How many people are there? Just walk us through some of the logistics, because I think that'll be really valuable for some of the business leader listeners today.
Yeah, I'll kind of speak to this in 2 ways. One, the structure, how we built it to support the change that was happening. This was our one chance for every single member to be in a room with a facilitator. Right now, there's only 4 of us at Johnsonville that can facilitate this content, because there is a rich understanding of the culture needed to be able to address questions, concerns. It's also a 3-hour class. So there's a train the trainer that we're working on, because we want more facilitators to be able to execute on it, but that takes time. So long story short, we have 4 of us that are consistently delivering on these workshops. And so the first 20 to 30 minutes is about the change. Members come into this thinking, why are we changing the values? They've maybe heard messaging, they've heard it from the CEO or senior leadership, but they want more. They're passionate about our culture. That's something that's very unique, I think, to our organization. We have members who are here because of the culture, and they've been here 20, 30 years. They've been an integral part of creating what the culture is. And so we have a really unique opportunity to make sure that we create some excitement for them, that our rich history is actually guiding our path forward. We sometimes have talked today about creating values. I think we really discovered the values that we are as an organization, right? They existed. These were things that we were doing. We just didn't talk about them in this kind of consolidated way. And now that we are, I think it's creating the clarity that we want. So we start off with that change process. How do we get here? In fact, my description and Steve's, if you put those together, that's what we have been communicating to every member at our organization. So that's how we kick it off. But one critical aspect of the workshop is we want the members in the room to know what superlative performance is for them. Johnsonville, we use the term superlative a lot. Steve asked me on my first day, what does superlative mean to you? And all I could think about was in high school, how people were assigned superlatives for being the class clown. They were the best of the best of whatever that descriptor was. And Steve's like, that's not what we're talking about here at all. And superlative, there was no word higher than like excellent, right? Like excellence is often talked about. We want our organization to be excellent in everything we do. And Ralph was like, what's beyond excellent? And he started to think that way. Superlative kept coming up as just the highest level we could possibly stretch for and reach to. And he wanted to define our performance and how we go after goals with that word superlative. And so it's stuck. It's a big part of who we are culturally. And so the start of the workshop is we need to identify for our members, what is it you're going after? And we made that pretty custom. So if you're in finance, here are the superlative goals for finance. If you're in operations, here are the superlative goals for all of you in operations. And so to your earlier point, Jason, we've actually split them up typically by location, department, allowing them to get that more targeted content around here are the goals of what we're trying to achieve in your department over the next several years. We want to paint a picture on the map. Here's where we're going. Here's where we want to get to. And then the entire workshop is, how are we going to get there? And that's when we dive into the values. We believe our values and those behaviors, our compass, right? Which Steve and I both have on. We did not plan this to be wearing the same quarters at today, but this is our core value compass. And this is going to guide us in our decision-making. It's going to guide us in how we attack these goals and start making progress towards them. And so then we go through each value. We introduce the value. We do some type of activity to create that learning experience. And then as facilitators, we debrief. We find out behaviors that went really well and how that connected to the value and areas where maybe they missed the mark. We talk about the too much and too little behaviors. We admit it. We might not be where we want ideally as a culture today. And those too much and too little might be happening in their environment. And it's up to each and every one of us to identify that and start to go and make that change for the wider culture. So we go through each value that way. We debrief the activities. And then we conclude really with that motivational, what do we need from you now as a member? What's your role? It's all in person.
It is 100%. There's no virtual option for this because of those activities. Like Jordan talked about, you're doing a puzzle as a group, right? It's that tactile. We do another one where we call it a meat stick. We have to lower a stick as a team to the ground or to your knees. Then we actually do humble candor. That's a role play, right? We pull real life scenarios. We put them in a triad, and then they have to role play and get some of that and give some real feedback on what worked well, what didn't work well. And then the last round, personal commitment, is every single person fills out a commitment card, and it's cultural commitment. I will commit to, and it's something they're individually going to do to commit to strengthen the culture at Johnsonville. And then we collect those, and our vision is that we're going to create one big mural, kind of a collage of all 4,000 commitments from all of our members from all over the world in multiple different languages. Put it out here at Global, where we have our orientations that come in. We have a video in there from Ralph, because at the center of our compass, which is our magnetic north, is love your neighbor. Ralph has always been passionate about love your neighbor, that, being nice to your neighbor it's one of those things that, I maybe say hi, as I pass you in the hall, but loving your neighbor requires some sort of a sacrifice or a little extra commitment. But we believe that's our responsibility. If I see Jordan about to do something, step in a metaphorical hole in performance or behavior, I should stop him right then and there, because I care enough about him to not let him get hurt or not let him do something that's going to stall his career. So I think how Jordan talked about that, it's a really great workshop, and people leave just energized, and you can see it's a very deep thinking workshop, because we're asking people to really internally think about the behaviors that I've been doing. Does that align to what we should be doing? I've not seen a member that I've talked to in my 28 years of working with human behavior and human performance where people, when they say, what's wrong with your organization? People don't usually say, you know what, I need to communicate better. I need to collaborate better with others. I'm not holding myself accountable. No, it's usually Jordan's not doing this. My coach isn't doing that. Senior leadership needs to do this differently. And this workshop is bringing it in on that personal commitment of, what do you need to do? If your team isn't communicating with you, what are you doing or not doing to contribute to that? Are you asking questions? Are you bringing it up? If somebody treated you poorly, what did they say when you talked to them about that, when you gave them that feedback? That's how we create a great culture in an organization. We're not there. We have an aspirational culture that we want to get to. We're not there yet. We may never get there, but it is not about, I think it's a true thing, Jason, of life isn't about discovering who you are. I think life is about creating who you want to become. And at Johnsonville, we are focused on what do we want to become as an organization, and what do I want to become as an individual. And if we've got 4,000 members that are dedicated and committed to becoming the best versions of themselves, we will have an amazing organization, and that's where we want to go.
That's absolutely fascinating to me. You talk about who you want to become, and how do you help get someone there? The understanding at which that you have there of understanding that it's not just enough to tell people, this isn't just a memo, it's not a newsletter thing. We actually need to do a workshop. We need to do structured activities together. We need to be in the room together. So many of the components that I've seen other companies steer away from. There literally was one company I saw when it came to rolling out their values. It was read these, sign at the end. Sign your pledge that you read these and you're going to do them. And it's like you're just going through the motions. It's like, why even bother with it? The intentionality, the thoughtfulness, the understanding, the psychological and the behavior, like the actual praxis of this, not just the orthodoxy, the understanding of it, but then the actual putting it into practice, how you've taken the time to curate this curriculum, these experiences that help people with the praxis aspect of it. I just absolutely loved. And that's why I was so excited to have you both on today, because I know that there are still many wonderful leaders listening to this episode who have great organizations. But if you want to take it to the next level, you're going to be doing what they're doing at Johnsonville. And that is taking your culture seriously enough that you actually have experiential workshops that work on the best practices, the behaviors, supporting one another and understanding what it means to actually live the values out. Don't let it just be a Slack channel. Don't just let it be a newsletter excerpt. Don't just let it be an email. You have to get in the room together. You got to get your hands dirty together and do some actual activities to make it sticky, to help you actually do it, and also understand that you're not doing it alone. I think that's the other aspect too, is sometimes it can feel like one of those things like, okay, the values is like a personal question. Yes, it's up to your own behavior, but you got to rely on each other. To your point, Steve, you said, pointing out, like, give someone feedback, both positive, or if there's something that they need to be challenged on, like, hey, I'm not exactly sure that's probably the best way to do it. If you could do it over again, think about the Johnsonville way. How would you do it again? Like, those things are the things that when it comes to human development that often are overlooked. And just, this is just my take. This is me getting on my soapbox. You can tell I'm passionate about this. I think a lot of times we don't want to slow down and take the time to learn that way. I think it's all about how quickly can we get this done? How quickly can we check the procedural box to say that we've gone through this, that everyone's been brought up to speed with what this is, as opposed to actually taking the time to nurture, develop, and grow the change in your people. And that's what I heard crystal clear from you, Steve, and you, Jordan, in your approach, is that this is not a box checking thing. This is not a let's get to the finish line the fastest kind of thing. This is all about impact. It's about growth, and it's consistent with your values in terms of how you're developing your people. So first off, kudos to you. And secondarily, thank you for sharing some of the behind the scenes, because I think that's exactly the type of things leaders need to hear in terms of the ingredients of what it takes to have this incredible culture and get your people that way. I did want to start getting into learning agility, but before we get there, Steve, was there anything else that you wanted to add in addition to all the incredible things Jordan shared around the workshops? Anything else from your perspective around the workshops you want to share?
It wasn't necessarily the workshops, but it's key to thought when you were talking about feedback. And to me, it is one of the most underestimated and undervalued thing we have as an organization and as individuals. If I'm left to just learn from trial and error, my learning curve is going to be pretty flat. If I get feedback from others, it just accelerates my learning curve. And I think about what people look at feedback in two terms, right? It's a positive feedback or it's constructive criticism feedback. And I've never liked those. I personally, I look at it as feedback to me is either reinforcing feedback or it's redirective feedback. And I always think about that. Like, I can reinforce the wrong behaviors just as easily as I can reinforce the right behaviors. And I can redirect the wrong behaviors and I can redirect the right behaviors into bad behavior. So to me, it's about, are you reinforcing or are you redirecting? And Jordan has a really interesting story that I'm going to ask him to share around, are you prepared to take feedback? And he talks about this in the workshop sometimes of, think about that scenario. Are you prepared? Jordan, would you share that?
Yeah. When we talk about humble candor, right, one of our values, we believe the culture of humble candor is dependent on how well we actually receive it versus that we're going and getting it. And the reason why is, how many times do you go give someone feedback, they respond poorly, our immediate reaction is, I'm never going to go give that person feedback ever again. You have one or two tries before you say, I don't think this person actually wants feedback from me. And so you start to think, okay, if that's the case, then doesn't our culture hinge on whether or not we accept feedback well around humble candor? And so what we challenge every single member that goes through the workshop, everyone that I've gone through, I say, you need to be prepared with, what are you going to say when someone sits down and says, hey, Jordan, I've got some feedback for you? How are you going to respond in that moment? I actually rehearse it in the mirror. I have what I want to say, how I want to respond. I've rehearsed it with my wife, and she's like, that wasn't very good. You need to change the way your face looked or your body language, right? Whatever that is, you need to experiment with it, because when emotion hits and you're flustered by the feedback, you're going to respond in a way you may not like to see if you aren't prepared for that moment. And just that preparation also kind of changes your reaction to it. For example, one of the first things I do when someone says, hey, can I give you some feedback? Say, yes, that's something that is really important to me. Let's sit down and talk about it. And as they start to give feedback, it's continuing to thank them, letting them know I view this as truly as a gift, because I can't get better until I get this type of feedback from you. And hold me accountable to if you're seeing these types of changes in me, because I'm going to start working on these things. And challenging our members to say, are you prepared for that moment, has really been impactful. And it's the looking in the mirror. You can do it in the mirror, right? You can look at yourself and say, am I responding in a way that creates and welcomes feedback? That is what we believe our culture is going to be hinging on, is how well can we accept it?
Boy, that's so important in life, isn't it? Not just at work, but like, to your point, like, if you don't get yourself ready to receive it in a good way, then you're going to find yourself pretty silent in terms of the voices around you, which isn't, you may think that's a good place to be like, hey, I'm doing great. Nobody's got any feedback for me. No, it's a totally different reason why they're not sharing anything with you. And it's good to be reminded and to prepare ourselves for that. The funny thing about feedback, I often share this, is this just blew my mind. It was a book I read a few years ago from Kate Murphy. And she talks about, it all has to do with the art of listening. And I never thought about this before, but it talked about how our own self-talk loops in our head, that it actually activates the exact same regions of the brain, same MRI imaging, as you having a conversation with someone else. Isn't that fascinating? And so one of the takeaways from her book was, thinking about feedback, thinking about the way that you talk is like, we often have our own worst critic in our own head. And that's a place to be that you don't want to, but you need to be able to get outside of that and trust other people to give you some perspective, because that's what you need. But it was interesting to me that, like, hey, if all you do is just stay inside your own head, it's activating these components as though you're having a conversation with someone else, but it's just a continual loop. And unfortunately, when you're in your own head, we tend to catastrophize, or we often think the worst, or we may nitpick on ourselves. And a lot of times the feedback we get from other people, even if it's like, I love the word redirect, it's coming from a loving place, and I think that's the important part to me, as I heard you talking about that, is we have to be prepared to receive the feedback and then lower your guard down. No one's wanting to attack you. Like, feedback is that opportunity to grow, to develop, to take you to places that you never dreamed that you could do on your own, because you can't do it on your own. But taking the time to actually teach that, to prepare people for feedback, I love it. Because most of what we train and develop and then launch leaders to do inside organizations is give the feedback, but we don't do a lot of training on how do you position yourself to actually receive it, take it, and then do something with it. That's really good. Good stuff, guys. So there you go, leaders. A lot of good stuff on how you get into a lot of the praxis of when it comes to culture, values, doing workshops around culture, of what it means to live those things out, to have best practices. So many important things now there. As we move toward the latter part of the show, now let's start to segue kind of some similar themes through the culture lens, the human development lens. But now let's start to get a little bit nerdier when it comes to like talking about artificial intelligence, because I know that you got some things that are going on there where you're thinking about it. What do you think it should look like? And I'd love for the leaders to hear from both of you today on Johnsonville. How are you thinking about artificial intelligence? How is it already being used? How are you thinking about it being used in the future and approaching that? And then maybe even, are there certain things where you're drawing a line in the sand and saying, these certain types of things, we don't think AI is going to touch that? Would love to hear some of those things. So Steve, let's kick off with you. I just opened up that Pandora's box, artificial intelligence. It's a big thing, but what's going on at Johnsonville as you think about artificial intelligence?
I think Jordan talked about it earlier, and it was kind of a nice thing of, if you're not using AI, you're running behind, right? I will say at Johnsonville, we were a little bit more of a fast follower rather than trying to be a leader out in AI. And the main reason is we have a lot of proprietary secrets that we don't want out in the World Wide Web, right? Whether it's our recipes, whether it's our pricing structures, all of these different things that you get really protective. And early on, there was a lot of these AI kind of functions or systems that we were starting to think about using, that when you put in questions, how you put it in, it can lead you down a pathway to exposing some of your content and secrets. So we were a little bit careful on that. We're cautiously treading some things in there. But some things that we've looked at is, we start out with some chat GPT, just some things like that. And now we've moved into more of like a Microsoft pilot type systems, where we've now got some internal processes that we are a little bit more safer to have conversations. So we use it a lot right now, whether it's, if it's a document, whether it's how do you craft up a communication, how to an email, different things like that. How do you synthesize down big amounts of data? We just went through our annual member engagement survey. And you think about what we've talked about in culture, great organizations, if you're getting 60, 65, 70% response rate, you're doing really good as an organization. Our response rate this last year was 89%. And that was globally. So this was an amazing thing. And with that, we had roughly about 6,000 comments that came in from our members. What's working well at Johnsonville? What's not working? What else do you want to tell us? Well, with that vast amount of data, it would take folks like either myself or Jordan, if we work together, it would take us a month to synthesize that down. So we were able to take comments and say, okay, let's take a look at like a plant, let's take a look at a location, and let's dump it into some more protected AI, right? That's not going to get out there. And we can put all the comments in and then ask it back to synthesize. What's the sentiment? What are we hearing? What is it saying? And it could give us some key themes by location. It gave us a 2-page executive summary. Now, there's lots of questions that you're building to get to it. And I have found that I actually went to a conference. This isn't mine, but I picked this up at a conference. It's how I changed what I ask AI to provide me back and these types of things. So I start out with context. What am I asking for? So context might be, hey, I need to put together a synthesis of all of these comments. I need the key sentiments. I need this. The next thing is I'll put in what's the role I want AI to play. I want you to play a senior leader. I want you to play a frontline member. I want you to think of a novice that's never heard this information before. How would you communicate it to them? Then I would say, what's the format that I want it in? I want a 2-paragraph executive summary. And then I want 5 bullet points with the key themes and 1 sub-bullet with a sentence of no more than 10 to 12 words to synthesize what that theme might be. Then I want you to think about what the sentiment might be. So you can lay out what's the format and then what's the action I want it to take. And then the most important thing I learned when I'm dealing with AI is at the end of every one of those, I simply put in, before you respond, please ask me 5 clarifying questions to make sure you understand my ask. And it'll come back with 5 questions like, what do you want the tone to be? Do you want it to be professional and descriptive, or do you want it to be, and you can answer those questions really quickly. And I have found when I do that, it takes me from asking AI 15, 20 times the different questions. I can do it now in like 3 or 4 times. Like, oh, I don't like this. I need a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that. So we were able to, I don't know, Jordan, it took us a full day maybe to synthesize down all 5 manufacturing facilities, our global headquarters, and our tech center, get an executive summary, key themes. Now, Jordan and I and senior leaders still read through every one of the 6,000 comments. But once you read through that, you kind of become like the ones where somebody's like at a DEFCON 4, right? Where they're really torqued off. Those are the ones you remember. And then you remember the ones where somebody was super, super nice about it. But this synthesizes out and pulls the sentiment. So that's a key piece where we used AI to probably take 3 months worth of work and put it down into a day. And now we're actually meeting with our CEO and our chief people officer tomorrow to walk through, hey, here's what we found out. And we've given them a little synopsis, have a pre-read about it. And they're super excited. Like, oh my gosh, this is going to help us make some changes. And then Jordan came up with a great idea around, now that we have this sentiment, what are the 5 things we could do that would really impact or have the biggest driver to our member morale and engagement? And it gave, for each plant and each location, 5 unique, distinct actions that we could take to drive further engagement. So that's probably the place where we've used some AI. Now, we've used it in lots of other places, but that's a good kind of test case that we could talk about.
That's really good. Jordan, we're going to come over to you in just a minute, but a quick comment on what you shared, Steve. It's interesting hearing you talk, and I love that you said that at the end that you tell it to, hey, what are 5 clarifying questions? It's funny. AI isn't all too different from people, is it? When it comes down to it. It was funny. I think it was Microsoft. This was about 2 months ago. Came out and said, biggest thing, that the aha moment for us as engineers with the AI has been that it doesn't like to admit when it's wrong or doesn't know an answer. And so what it's going to do is it's going to make up something. So they were trying to figure out, do the research on why is it hallucinating so much? Like, does it have to do something with the code? Turns out it's just as biased as we are in terms of not wanting to say, I'm not sure. It doesn't want to say that. So unless you give it the instructions and say, it's okay for you to say that you're not sure, instead of feeding me lies, instead of hallucinating, and giving me stuff that may not be real. And so when you're sharing that, the other component of how I think a lot of times it reflects human behavior, many times, is a lot of times we don't like to ask clarifying questions. Just be like, okay, I think I got it. I may not be 100%, but I think I know enough about it. And so you're treating the AI just like you do anyone else to make sure that you have clarity and that you're setting the expectations for how it comports itself. I think that's a really important lesson that you just shared there, Steve. Jordan, how about you? Anything that you wanted to add on to what Steve was sharing, or some additional components of what you're doing around AI?
Yeah, there's one other one that's really stuck out, and it's more we're in the early phases of it. A workshop, not an easy way to scale a workshop. You just got to grind through it, right? It's in person. We have to take steps to just go and do those sessions. So you can't really scale it, but AI for me, I see it as a scalability tool. We have a global organization, right? Over 4,000 members and growing. We're in 9 different languages. So when you start to think about leadership development and how do we develop our leaders to coach to the culture, that is where we're starting to see opportunities with AI. There's different tools out there. One that we looked into a little bit is Reflex AI. And it's this tool where you can go through a simulation as a coach, where you're actually talking to an AI direct report that has been programmed to respond in a certain way, to have maybe certain interests, and is dealing with a certain issue that you will talk to this AI bot, essentially, that's been built. And we can then assess how well that coach handled that situation. Did they coach that person effectively? Did they talk about the values and tie back the behaviors to our core values? And we can start to learn at scale how well are our coaches actually coaching to the culture. And that's an opportunity where we can't have, a few of us on a team sitting down and doing a simulation in person with, hundreds of coaches across the globe. But this is just something interesting to explore as an organization. Hey, how do we do this at scale? How do we set this up? And the reality is we still have to be the masterminds behind setting all that up. And so it requires that creativity on our end to say, is this going to get the desired learning outcomes that we're trying to achieve? But then AI can scale it for us. So that's how I see us using that. It's really been a partnership with Kelly on our team that works closely with Steve and I. My role has been, does it align to the culture, right? Kelly's is really, she's so knowledgeable on organizational learning that she's going to carry, how does this actually develop our coaches? And so that's an early partnership where we're seeing AI in that capacity.
At Johnsonville, so with that, Jordan, are there certain types of expectations in terms of how AI is supposed to be used in certain departments or certain roles now, where it's starting to get into job descriptions or any of the type of language in terms of like looking at performance? Is it starting to make its way that way instead of it being a, hey, hop in if you want to and kind of figure things out, to more of like an expectation of like, hey, we're trying to solve this problem and this is part of your role or part of your team of what you do. We need to be leveraging AI to solve it. Can you kind of help us understand what that's starting to look like at Johnsonville?
Yeah, I'm seeing it as an expectation. And Steve, I think we could talk about this collectively, but from the board of directors, they always want to hear, how are we using AI to propel all of our efforts forward? That's been very consistent over the last year or so. And that's what I've been hearing as my initiatives have reached that level and we're having conversations with those leaders. So I think it is becoming an expectation of how are you using it to add value to what you can produce as a team, become more efficient, more effective. So that's what I've experienced more high level. Steve, what would you add to that?
I think you hit on it really well, Jordan. It is becoming that expectation. And I think we're still in most of our organization in a, let's test it, let's pilot it, and let's find the spots where it's the most advantageous. I've heard it from our communications team of, hey, the expectation is we're going to hire people and that can utilize AI to get us started. It's where can we find the opportunities, right? We used, it's not necessarily AI, but it's electronic robots almost to parcel out certain work, right? We have stuff in sourcing. We have to fill out the same document for the government with when we purchase sows. And it used to require somebody to stay at 7:00 at night and go into multiple different websites and pull out a piece of data here, a piece of information there, and submit this information in. Now we've got this automated robot that can go to those same websites, pull the information out. Took hundreds of people hours and condense it down to now there's a system that can do it. Now, the great thing that is at Johnsonville is the reason we're doing that is not to eliminate positions. It's to expand as we continue to grow, how do we use the business to build our people? And what we do is we take the day-to-day kind of grunt work or busy work off of your plate to be more creative, to be more value added. Let's take the work that is holding you back from adding more value to the organization, and let's let AI run with those things, or let automated robotics do those things. And then we can turn our people into the creativity side, go sell more sausage, figure out how do we do better marketing, how do we do better analytics, those types of things. So I think the directive isn't use AI to reduce your workforce. I don't think that's been the direction, but it's how do you use AI to, like Jordan said, be more efficient, be more productive, get more value on the things that we need humans to be focusing on. And the stuff that somebody else can do, like an AI function, let's let that function do that work. That's kind of the direction, but we're still kind of, I think about it like a frozen lake. We're in Wisconsin, so we talk about ice fishing and stuff like that. You don't just run out on a lake, right? You got to test to make sure the ice is thick enough. And I think that's where we're at with AI is we're a ways from the shore now, but we're still not just running full blast across the lake. We want to make sure we don't fall in somewhere and end up with a bad decision and information's out in a spot where we don't want it to be. Because our secret brat recipe has been a secret since the 1945. We don't want that ending up somewhere on the internet, right? Johnsonville brat, we're very proud of it. We're very proprietary around those things, so we are more cautious.
And you should be. I had some of those just a few weeks ago. I'm always getting Johnsonville stuff. But absolutely that makes a lot of sense. And the other piece too that I love to hear is I love that analogy of the ice, because I think that's perfect, Steve. McKinsey just came out with finding on, as of today, and this report just came out in the last week or two, as of today, so we're in October of 2025. What does successful AI implementation adoption look like in businesses? What it boiled down to was primarily automations. The stuff that's working really well is the automation stuff. A lot of the stuff that's not is more of the agentic. We want to set up this agent to replace this person and be able to handle all the complexities, the intricacies, the emotive, the understanding how to respond, all that type of stuff. That stuff is not working well. And I think that's where you had some companies making headlines. They're trying to make a big splash and say, we're getting rid of our customer support department of humans. It's all going to be run by agents. Klarna was one of those, and they did an about face pretty quickly after they saw how poorly it was running. And so that's just another thing I really admire about what you're doing at Johnsonville is this approach of thinking about it through the lens of, yes, the board is like, how are we using AI? But the way you're thinking about it is, how are we using AI to help our people get more margin to step into the superpowered human intelligence they have around creativity, around discernment, around wisdom? Those are the things that you're creating space for by looking at AI more through the automation lens, instead of just saying, we're going to create an agent and it's going to replace, a person or a role. The companies that have been trying to take that approach are the ones that unfortunately are making the headlines right now that are really struggling. And then they end up trying to hire back people to do a lot of those roles. So I love hearing that approach, that philosophy at Johnsonville in the analogy you gave, Steve, of the ice. You need to test things, but ultimately you need to be thinking about, okay, how are we using this to help our people improve the quality and efficiency of the work that they do, to free them up to create additional value and focus on more of the things that are value add for them and value add for the company. And I love that mindset. And leaders, if you're listening to this episode, I think that's an important takeaway. Don't just think through the lens of productivity, but how is this actually going to better the human capital aspect, the culture aspect? You've got to be asking those really important questions around artificial intelligence. And it's really neat to hear too that you're starting to move that direction of, it's not just if you feel like it, use it, but that it is starting to be like, okay, this is an expectation. This is part of the Johnsonville way of the learning agility, is that we are all going to be thinking about AI really well and how we can leverage it to help us do our work even better and serve our clients even better.
as you think about that piece of the tie of AI back to the culture that we talked about, I think about what you just talked about with the AI and what we talked about with giving feedback. It's about the intentionality of it, right? If I'm giving you feedback because I care about you as a person, I want you to be better, you can handle the content that I'm sharing with you. If I'm sharing feedback because I'm smarter than you, I'm better than you, or I'm the boss of you, if that's how you feel, it's the same thing with AI. If our members feel that the intention is to replace workers with AI, they're going to resist it all day long. If the intention is we want to help you do your job better so you can be more productive and you can do more value-added work to better use your God-given talents, they can accept the content coming at them. So I think those two kind of come full circle.
They do. That's a beautiful way to dovetail those together. And again, kudos to you, Johnsonville, for leading that way. I really do believe that the companies that are built for sustainability, not just immediate profitability, but the ones that are in it for the long game, the infinite game, as Simon Sinek talks about, are companies like Johnsonville, that it still is going to be about your people and your culture. And just because we now have AI in the mix too, and we're figuring out how to use that well, doesn't change that you still got to focus on those other components too. So that's a good reminder. As we get ready to enter kind of like wrapping up this episode, this has been phenomenal. I want to ask you both, is there something so far that we have not covered that you wanted to today? Jordan, let's kick off with you. Anything that you want to share that's top of mind for you in this episode that we haven't covered so far?
I think it's that last topic we were on with AI. And I think the example of the sentiment analysis around comments not being a good use of maybe my time and Steve's time, but our talents. Then once we have that, how do we go and actually make the changes and help leaders support the change based on what we learned in that sentiment analysis? And that to me is an exciting use case for AI, helping me use my talents to then go out, help these coaches, help these leaders with their facilities actually make the changes they want to see. So that was one thing that we maybe didn't fully connect the dots there on that sentiment analysis, but that's our next step, right? Now we have the information. What are we going to do with it? Instead of 3 months doing analysis, let's spend the next 3 months working with these facilities and hopefully seeing some really productive change that increases the engagement of our membership. So, Jason, thanks again for having me.
Yeah, I think it's an important lesson for leaders when we talk about whether it's AI or automation or major investments. And it's that point of don't get so locked into whatever you've sunk costs into that you won't make an adjustment. I think about an example. We had a production facility and we put in massive automation. It was a huge investment and we used it for 5, 6, 7 years and it was never producing the way we needed it to be because some of the variables changed. But as an organization, rather than saying, we've invested, we're going to make it work, we got to a point where like, you know what, we just need to rip that equipment out and let's go back to let's put people back there and let's manually do it for a while until we figure out the right solution. And I think so many times leaders, I get stuck in this. I've made a decision, we've invested into it, and then it's just not working out. And you don't want to say, that maybe wasn't the best decision. We should maybe make a 90 or 180 degree turn and just start over. But that's truly, when you think about one of our values of learning agility, the learning agility is being smart enough to say, I wasn't smart enough to figure this out today. It's okay to say, I reserve the right to get smarter. What I thought was not the right thing, we got to change. But sometimes when you sink costs into something, it's so hard to admit that you're wrong and say, I reserve the right to get smarter and we got to try something differently. So I think that's an important part when people think about whether it's AI or automation or even culture, right? It was a big thing for Johnsonville to say, you know what, the 9 values that we had, it got us here, but it's not going to get us to where we want to be. It's a massive investment. There was a lot of sunk costs, but anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. Try it. If it doesn't work, you can always reverse engineer.
I love that. You've had some really good ones, Jordan and Steve, today, but that one right there, I reserve the right to get smarter. I think I'm actually going to use that with my wife and kids.
Well, that is what we call a Ralphism, right? So that's from Ralph Stayer. That's not me. That's a Ralphism, and you'll hear a lot of what Jordan and I talk about are some of those Ralphisms.
I love it. I love it. So, Ralph, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to give that one a try. Let's see how it goes with my wife next time. Like, hey, you weren't supposed to go to Steak and Shake after the baseball game with our son. You could have come back home and helped with the other kids. I'm just getting smarter, honey. I'll learn. Okay, duly noted. Next time. I love it. Hey, it's been great being with you too. Learning so much from the vision, the theory, the strategy. We got down into tactically how you execute on these things. And especially being a larger company, how you've not let that become a barrier to doing things the right way when it comes to people and culture. You are absolutely an incredible company, two incredible leaders yourselves, and leading it that way. And I'm so glad that our listeners are going to get to hear and learn from you in this episode. As we get ready to wrap up here, what are the best ways for folks to learn more about Johnsonville, not just the company that they see in the supermarket, but maybe a little bit more behind the scenes? What's the best way for them to continue learning about the way that you do things at Johnsonville?
I think there's a few ways. One, you can go out on our website, right? Johnsonville Sausage. If you look it up, you'll find some amazing things. You can find all of that. You can look up myself and Jordan on LinkedIn, or quite honestly, you can even just look up, how do you contact Johnsonville? You'll call Sandy at the front desk and she'll answer with the same phrase all the time of the best to you from Johnsonville. And you can ask for Jordan or I, and she'll connect you with us. But LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. But we're a global company that just happens to be located in Wisconsin, and we have a lot of those Wisconsin roots in it. So we're open to share. There's nothing proprietary that we've talked about today as far as our culture. I think this is a recipe that you could use at any organization of how we went through that. Now, your outcome is probably going to be different, right? But this is a recipe that we found to be successful. And I think about in all my career, and I'm getting towards the end of my career, so I'm getting excited, as you can tell from all the gray. This to me is one of those legacy things. I don't think there's anything more proud I've ever been in my career about what we've done with our culture. And I'm extremely excited. Now, this goes back to my previous company. The best is yet to come. I think we are moving down a great path. So that's the best way to get a hold of us, I think. Jordan, anything else you'd add?
No, I would say we are invested too, Steve, in ATD, right? And as Johnsonville, we share a lot of what we're doing and what we're working on with our ATD forum. We'll often try to be speakers at conferences if that makes sense. So if you as a leader are interested in talent development and what that looks like, getting involved with ATD, you might run into us at a lot of those events.
I love that. ATD, LinkedIn, but probably my favorite is give Sandy a call at Johnsonville. So, hey, Sandy, if you start getting a bunch of phone calls from leaders like, hey, I want to be able to talk with Steve Sorensen and Jordan Lindstrom, that's what I want to hear, is getting feedback of like, hey, we got the phones ringing here at Johnsonville, Sandy's picking up, and we've got leaders reaching out to learn more from Steve and Jordan. Thank you both for being here, and we'll have to do it again. Gentlemen, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks for tuning in to Working Forward. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Until next time, here's to building tomorrow today.